No, it's just not. It's saying that what applies for one applies for plurality as well. Like for example,
In the same chapter and verse.
so it's the same thing. One disbeliever and many disbelievers. It doesn't need to be sense.
It doesn't make sense.
What's the specific example?
Sorry?
What's the example? What's the ayah?
There's many examples of this. You don't need to go to chapter 13 verse 42.
I've got
Just go to
many
chapter
here.
1 verse 4. Go to the first chapter of the Quran. There's Malik, which means owner of the Day of Judgment. And Malik, which means the king of the Day of Judgment. They're two different things.
Which one do you take?
Both.
How can you take both?
Why not?
What's the problem with that?
So you take
So if you ask
you
me-
take the house and then any other one that sounds the same, but you still
Which
take
qira'ah is the other one? You said one's the
Ibn
Hafs.
Jamaz.
Which one?
Ibn
So
Jamaz.
you asked me a question about Hafs, yeah?
This is the
By the
Hafs.
way, with the Malik and Malik example, 6 of the qira'at is Malik, and 4 of them are Malik. So 6 of the 10, and by the way, Hafs is not a qira'at, it's a riwayah. Anyways, this is information for you. Let me teach you about this, yeah? The qira'at is Asim. Yeah? There's 10.
The Christian brothers there. The Christian brothers.
What was I saying?
Hafs is not qira'ah.
Where should we get the...
riwayah?
Alright, sir. Let's see if you're consistent.
This is camera.
Who's it? Is that his camera, yeah? Oh, okay, cool. Sorry, go ahead.
You were explaining something.
Yeah, so
I
basically...
can ask you another one.
Yeah, so the Prophet, what happened, yeah, is that the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he received revelation, yeah? We believe. Our claim is that, so when Allah communicated to him through Gabriel, angel Gabriel, in specific verses, he communicated 2 different variants of the same message, and both of those are accepted. For example, in Surah Al-Fatiha, chapter 1 of the Quran, verse 4, he communicated to him Malik Yawmuddin, which means the owner of the Day of Judgment, and he also communicated to him Malik Yawmuddin, which means the king of the Day of Judgment. If you ask me which one is it king or owner, we will say it's both of those things. We believe that Allah is the owner of the Day of Judgment and that he is the king of the Day of Judgment. Now the challenge is as follows. Where is the contradiction in those 2 things? Because you'll never find a contradiction in the variants. And by the way,
The contradiction is the plurality and singularity. The one I showed you.
No, but
That's the way the contradiction comes.
Okay, so you're
supposed to
saying-
refer to one and many.
So
which
that's
one
your
do you
claim. We say both.
that's the claim
So
of the Quran.
okay, so in this verse, it's talking about the masir, the situation of a certain disbeliever, but also of all the disbelievers that follow in his tract.
Which one is it though?
Both.
It can't be both. It's
Why
only
can't
one
it?
chapter and one verse.
Do you know in logic, my friend, this is
Doesn't
called-
make sense.
Now, hold on.
It doesn't make sense.
Let me tell you something.
You're just taking
What's your,
it
I forgot your name, sorry.
as it is.
Daniel. In logic, this is called a false dichotomy. Do you know what a false dichotomy is?
What about it?
A false
I know.
a false dichotomy is literally when you make something seem like a contradiction when there's no reason for us to consider it a contradiction.
Okay, if I say to you, I saw many people there, and if I say same place, I saw one person there.
Yeah,
is that
that's
the same?
different. That's different because now
How is that different from here?
why is to read the context of that verse? Read the verse.
Brother, we just read it together.
No, we didn't.
I want to read another one.
It's not the same. See now. I'll read it later. I don't need to read everything.
Do you know the reader?
You read it.
Can you
look,
read it?
look, I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
You want me to read it?
The example that you gave is a valid example of contradiction. Yeah? You've just given a valid example of contradiction. But where it relates to the Quran, I'm saying, can you bring me an example like the one you just given, where it refers to one specific situation, and one person is saying it's many, or one? Do you get it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Go on, read it. You read it in Arabic. I'm not gonna read it.
You can't read Arabic, so you read it.
No, you read it. I'm not
It's not
reading
Arabic.
I'm not reading
What
books
do you
and
mean?
stuff like that. You guys deal with it.
But you
Bring
read
it.
Arabic, isn't it?
Of course.
So he's telling you to read it.
No, you bring it forward and you explain your case. No, it's alright.
You need to bring the book.
Let's see if you're consistent.
That's right.
I don't. Let's see if you're consistent. This is Surah 15:8, yeah? So we do not send down the angels except with truth, and the disbelievers would not then be reprived. That's your Hafs version, yeah?
Yeah.
And the Quran version says,
leave it. It's okay because it's going to be too much. I'm just answering his shubuhat.
Quran version says, the angels do not descend except with truth, and the disbelievers would not be reprived. So that's 2 different words. They say one of them says we do not send down, and the other one said the angels do not descend. The Arabic word is here, tanazzalu and nun nazil. That's what they say.
Tanazzalu. Tanazzalu means bring down.
Yeah.
Or
angels-
what's the problem?
Tanazzalu. Okay. Tanazzalu means
Same
come down.
meaning,
Nunazzilu
different wording.
means Allah is bringing them down.
no contradiction.
This one says the angels do not descend.
Yeah.
With the context.
Tanazzalu malaika, yeah?
Inside.
Tanazzalu means come down, yeah? Nunazzilu means we
There's no
cause to bring
contradiction in the
down.
variance.
Okay.
So, okay.
Coming down could be from angels.
No. One of them says tanazzalu. Tanazzalu means come down generally. And the other one says nunazzilu, which means that we are causing that to happen.
No, tanazzalu means the angels do not descend. Except
Tanazzalu
with
just
the
means
truth.
come down in Arabic. That's what it means.
Okay, but the context here says the angels do not descend.
Okay.
And the other one says we do not send down.
Now, nunazzilu, that word nunazzilu, all it means is we are sending down. That's what it means. Now, I'm just telling you what the words mean. You get me? So, look, the point of
But the two different words written,
yeah,
in your
those
Quran.
basically here you have to understand our thesis. Our thesis has never been that every verse of the Quran has only ever been read one time or in one way. Our thesis is that there are selected verses of the Quran that can be read in more than one way. That's our thesis.
But you haven't shown me that. You haven't shown me the quote of Tabri and Katir of what you just said.
I don't have the books with me, but you can check it up yourself.
I can check it up.
I don't think you're going to have, but you're not going to be able to read it. It's in Arabic. Somebody has not been translating it to English.
You're right, English versions.
There's no English translation of somebody.
Yeah, I've read it. I've read it.
I don't know. I haven't seen that.
You're
No,
right.
no, all
But
you
that's
get,
not the point.
you probably get a maximum of an abridged version. You know, the kind of summarized version.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think there's one translation that the Jordanian government tried to do, and they put it on like tafsir.com or something like that. But that's not the Tabari. That's not the entire corpus of Tabari.
Okay, so are you saying in this
So
specific...
you wouldn't even be able to read it, even if I give it a reference.
Are you saying in this specific 1342 what Tabri talks about this?
Yeah. Tabari and Ibn Kathir and other mufassirun.
Can you bring it next week?
Bring it what? The Arabic that you're not going to be able to read.
No, you can read it.
Oh, okay, I've just told you that. So I've made the
I
claim.
can ask the Arabic speakers, that's fine.
No, that's fine. So you can check it, whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's there for you.
Yeah, Arabic is just a language, it's nothing like big.
Okay, that's cool. So you're going to check it up.
Yeah,
So
so-
basically, what we're saying, my thesis to you was that because you said in the beginning that this idea that some verses can be read in more than one way, this is something which is new. Yeah, I'm saying no. This was something that was known to the Salaf. It's mentioned in Sahih Bukhari, a Muslim. It's mentioned in Muslim Hadith. Umar ibn Khattab, who is one of the caliphs of Islam after obviously Abu Bakr Siddiq, he was listening to a particular Sahabi recite Surah Al-Furqan, chapter 25 of the Quran, yeah? And it was in selected verses different to the way he memorized it. So he went, Umar ibn Khattab took this Sahabi and he went to the Prophet Muhammad and he said, look man, he said he seized him, he literally grabbed him, he grappled him, because he thought that this guy was trying to make a new religion or something like that. Do you get me? He took him all the way to the Prophet Muhammad and he said to him, why recite it? Yeah? And then the Prophet Muhammad listened to what he said and he told Umar to recite it. Umar ibn Khattab recited it and he said, هَكَذَا أُنزِلَتْ وَهَكَذَا أُنزِلَتْ. So it was revealed in this way and it was revealed in this way. So these verses that you're coming with that are basically, you have more than one way of reciting it, they have been revealed according to the Prophet Muhammad in those both ways. Do you get me? So what I'm trying to say is that these variants, it's not first, it's in our books of hadith. The Prophet Muhammad in the book of Sahih Muslim, he made dua, he made supplication to Jibril. He said to Jibril, may Allah make the Quran such that Thaqif will be able to listen, a particular tribe will be able to understand it, and this tribe will be able to understand it. And this, so basically Jibril answered him through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he worked with Jibril, and this is why you have some...
So did Jibril say to him, unbelievers and then unbeliever? He gave him
Yes,
both.
yes, exactly, yes.
He gave him both.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so
I've never heard that.
Do you get me?
I get you, but I never heard that.
Now,
You started to show me on Tabri.
Can I just make one point? Just before you start, you can obviously ask me any question you want, but can I tell you why this is completely different to the Christian problem? Because I know why you're doing this. You're not doing this because, as Christians, you feel like, okay, if there are variants, that's a problem and it proves the religion wrong. correct me if I'm wrong, but you're doing this because we as Muslims, we come to you guys and we say, look, you've got this version of the Bible, you've got this version of the Bible, you've got this version of the Bible, yeah? So we use it as an argument against you. So you say, okay, well, let's turn the tables over, innit? So let's go and show them that they've got variants in their Quran as well. There's 26 different Qurans or whatever, yeah? Okay, I understand this argument, but you have to understand also from our perspective that there's a difference. I'll tell you what the difference is.
You try to understand the Bible.
No, not the Bible. What I'm saying is our argument is...
just brought it up, so I'm trying to understand what we said about the Bible. Whatever you said about different Bibles.
So your point is, as far as I'm concerned, like when I listen to preachers like James White and others, my understanding is there's not really a controversy that the Bible, for example, has been altered and changed, and omissions have been taken out, and insertions have been put in. There's not really an issue with that. For you guys, so long as the tenets, the core principles stay in place, yeah, then it's not a problem if there was a scribal error or whatever.
We are transparent as well.
Yeah, so you guys are trying. So you guys are saying this is not an argument, yeah, for the lack of religion. Our argument is that the Quran is word for word preserved. You're saying if it's word for word preserved, then how come you find the variant? What I've just said to you is that listen, the difference here is between the variants that you'll be able to find within the Quranic discourse and the variants that you'll find in the biblical discourse is that the ones that are found within the Quranic discourse have a authentication from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in other words,
We don't know about.
no, which I've given you the proof for. Yeah?
No, you haven't.
Yeah, of
You
course
just said it. You
But
just said it.
whereas with the Bible, there's no authentication from Jesus. You get the difference, yeah? Sure.
Regarding the Surah 25,
Yeah.
so differences were that disturbing that Umar wanted to grab Hisham or Hisham wanted to grab Umar. So that those differences were pretty disturbing. And Muhammad said, now writing both of them. Okay? Can you just provide book for me that I can see what were the differences with the Umar side or with the Hisham side? I can compare that with the Hafs version. Plus, I think it's helpful to remember Uthman discredited all those 7 different ways. When Muhammad said, Allah revealed the Quran to me in 7 different ways, Uthman discredited them and then made one perfect one. So all those qira'ats, all those differences appears after Uthman. Can you comment on that? Plus, also, how can you be sure actually what Muhammad recited when you look at all those differences? Because, for example, Hafs Quran goes back to the narration when you kind of look things, it goes to the Ubayyid Kaf in that list. Okay. But we know that in the Islamic tradition, as Ubayyid Kaf recited the certain surahs, Muhammad steps in and then that different recitation caused doubt to Ubay bin Ka'b. He has doubt in his faith that Muhammad.
And then he pointed at him in his heart, in his chest.
Chest, and then because.
Then the doubt left him.
Yeah, it struck in his chest.
Yes.
Yet also again same Islamic tradition tells us Muhammad didn't remember the certain part of the Quran, yet he prays for people to remind that. So looking at all those messed up Islamic tradition, how can you be confident that the Quran you are reading, of course if you can provide me the 7 different verses of the Surah 25 and also for the Surah 10, describing cover the Surah, if you provide those different surahs we can see what are the differences. Here's the problem. Of course, you can look at the Bible and then you can even give quotation from the scholars. They are talking about there are the variations. Reason for that is throughout centuries as a Christians we've been open about it and we are talking about it. You just grab my Bible, there is a footnote says, oh watch out, this is not in some of the earliest manuscripts. But why I cannot find the Quran which tells me, oh watch out, Surah 33 verse 6 and Surah 33 verse 40 is different and then it changed the theological differences. Why I cannot find this? Why you are not open about this?
Okay, can I thank you very much. Yeah, that's good. No, I'm happy. The questions are fair. Actually,
Sorry, just one.
Yes.
Can we do time to time?
There's no need to time because you're respecting each other.
Can we do time to time?
It's up to you. It's up to you. Whatever you want. 3 minutes is good. So make it a bit short. Okay, that's fine. Now, there's a few issues. I'm happy that you've done your research. You obviously tried to do your research. There's a few mistakes that you made. One of the mistakes that you made is that you said that Uthman ibn Affan, he put all the qira'ahs in one. Is that what you said, yeah?
I didn't say Quran.
What did you say? What did you
I
say?
said different ways. So Quran is revealed in 7
Ahruf,
different ways.
ahruf.
Quran is revealed in 7 different ways. Usman made it in one way.
Okay.
I could say Ahruf, but I know Islamic traditions disagree what is Ahruf.
Alright, cool. So let me
Quran
just...
is different from that.
Okay, good. So here, the question is, what is the difference between the ahruf and the qira'ah?
That's not my question.
No, so I'm sitting on my time. Can I say what I want? Can we start again? Alright. Basically, what I was going to say is as follows, yeah? The qira'at al-ashr, the 10 mutawatir or authentically transmitted qira'at al-Quran, all of them, we believe, have a mutawatir chain, which means this chain is mass transmitted by a plethora of different individuals at every level, yeah? Now, you said, how comes, you said in chapter 25, for example, can you find me the 7 different ways that it was recited? That's not how the ahruf works. Because what you're presupposing is that in every verse of the Quran, there has to be 7 different transmissions or differences, yeah? That's not what the thesis is. No one has ever said that. For example, Surah Al-Fatiha, chapter 1 of the Quran, all of Surah Al-Fatiha is the same among all 7 Qur'an, except for one word, which is Malik. So in other words, there's one difference with one word, which is expressed in 10 different qira'at. So 6 of those qira'at say Malik and 4 of them say Malik. So from that perspective, that's one harf that's being transmitted over the span of 10 different things. I'm really happy that you, and I actually commend you for coming forward and saying that as Christians you admit basically in your Bible that there are footnotes that say that this is not in the earliest manuscripts and all these things. I'm very, very happy with that. I think now it's high time that we get over this hurdle and we just be open about it. I'm happy that you said that. I'm very grateful to you for that actually. Now my contention is that this is problematic. Not because there's variants, but because those variants are not authenticated by Jesus Christ and therefore not by God. So therefore you have human tampering in the Bible. This is what you have to prove from the Quranic perspective. Because all of the variants that you're finding, the stylistic variants, are authenticated by the Prophet by way of mass transmission. Not only transmission and chain, but mass transmission. And we can prove that with great ease. So here the point is, you asked about how comes the Quran that you have doesn't have within it that more than one way of being able to pronounce the different Qur'an is absolutely false. There is. Like for example, the Hafs Quran that you pick up now, it can facilitate at least 3 different Qur'ans. And that's why you have some words that have other 2 ways of being able to be pronounced. So Salat is actually spelled Salawat. Salawat. Anyways, I'm not going to go into a long discussion. So we do have that.
You don't So,
Yeah, go ahead.
can you just give me the date when the 10 qira'ats have been officialized? Can you give me that date and then I'll move on?
All of the Qur'ans have been official from the beginning.
Okay, so can you please provide something for me that I can see Al-Bazi's Quran is officialized in time of Muhammad? You've got nothing.
Al-Bazi.
You've got nothing for that.
So is that a question you want me to answer?
That was a question, so when your time comes,
Okay.
you will answer that. So, your 10 qira'ats have been officialized. Actually, not in the time of Muhammad. Let me give you the date for that. And dates are pretty late for this. It's strange, but it's pretty late for that. So your 10 qira'ats have been officialized in 1397. 1397, so 14th century, end of 14th century.
By who?
I'll tell you the name, and I'm sure you already know that. So in 935, you had a 7 readings Ibn Mujahid, and in 1397, Ibn al-Jizri added 3 more Qurans, and then you can detect from the Sunnah, you can see all those things. Plus that, when you go back, actually you see in 839, there are 25 different Arabic Qurans, someone kadar. In 900s, there are 50 different Arabic Qurans people are gathered. So, my question was to you, can you just
Who's ever said this?
my question to you was, can you please provide what were those differences in this regarding the Surah 25, that we can see that. So, because my book has footnote, you can talk about the John chapter 7, John chapter 8, but your Quran doesn't have footnote regarding the Surah 25, what was Hashim recited, what was Umar recited, Hisham, what was Umar recited. So you do not have that, you don't know that. You have to have faith that Uthman was good enough to make that decision. Remember, Uthman brought it to one dialect. Yet, as I commented, and then you didn't even come back to me, when you look at the chain of the Hafs Quran, the Bible card is in that chain, yet the Bible card is in that chain, yet we know Hafs Quran is that. Is that so? I would love you to give me a source that the Bible card is not that. I would love you to give me the source. How can you be sure Ibn Masud's Quran and the Bible card was not the same as we know according to Islamic tradition, there were disagreements and the Quran was different. Yet today, because you failed to be open about it, can you please comment on Surah 21 verse 6 and Surah 23 verse 40, which change the theological of the meaning of the sentence for 0. And my Quran doesn't have those footnotes because you haven't been completed.
Okay. So the first thing you said was true. I mean, you have to trust Uthman. But it wasn't just Uthman, it was Uthman and the people that are around him. As you know, I'm sure you do know, because you've done a lot of work into this. They've done a lajna, which means a commission. So it was Uthman, Zayd ibn Thabit, Ibn Mas'ud was there, who she mentioned himself. Who in the beginning, it's true, had an understanding that 2 surahs were not part of the Quran. Then he changed his mind afterwards, when he realized that everyone was narrating the Quran with Falaq and Nas. The point is here, that the evidences that you provided are a mix of academic arguments with falsehoods. Like, for example, when you were speaking for a while, you said that there's 50 different Qur'ans or something like this. I mean, what's your source for that? Then you said that Ubay ibn Ka'b was part of the... No, your time. Ubay ibn Ka'b, he said he was part of the chain, and he said he was part of the chain of Hafs, which is not true. Because the chain is exactly that Hafs narrated upon Asim, who narrated upon Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, who related upon Uthman al-Affan, who related on Allah. And Abu Ubay ibn Ka'b is not there at all. So here, but hold on. So that's 2 points. The third point you've made is about...
This is time. He's only got 5 minutes. It's time,
So that's point number 2. Point number 3. Point number 3. What you said, what is the evidence of that as a reference? You can go to Tabaqat al-Qurra, which is written by Ibn al-Jazari himself, who's someone you quoted yourself. And then you had the audacity to say that, I'm sorry, I don't mean this in a rude way, but you had the kind of academic audacity to claim that the Qira'at were only known at the time of Ibn al-Jazari, where he himself in Tayyibat al-Nashr, which is the book he wrote, he said that these existed, the Qira'at existed before. He formalized them as with a Shatibi, and he put it into poetic form and book form so that everyone understands. But this is the difference between formalizing something so that everyone understands it, and putting it into existence himself, which is of course 2 completely different things. That's 2 things. Now, I am happy that you've admitted in this discussion, because this is quite a fruitful discussion. She's admitted that the Bible has footnotes in it which say that this part is in the manuscript, this part is not in the manuscript. And therefore there's been human involvement in the biblical text. She's open about that. I'm saying this is unacceptable. Why? Because you don't have anything going back to Jesus with those variants. We have everything in terms of our stylistic variants we have gone back to the Prophet Muhammad who authenticated it through chain of narration, who had it authenticated by Allah. So everything that you're reciting today, whether it's Hafs and Asim, or Warsh and Nafi', or whatever it is, Al-Bazi, or whatever you want, or Ibn Amir, or Ibn Amr, or Al-Kisai, or Hamza, or any of those qira'at, any of those individuals, they have a chain going back to the Prophet. So we would call that the Quran. So the issue here is not, the issue here is that you're unable to do the same thing with the Quran, with the Bible. We have a preserved Quran, or you don't have a preserved Bible.
I'll give you the chains for the Hafs, and you can correct yourself on that. So, Hafs narration goes. First of all, I'll give you the dates for Hafs. It's 800. So, Abu Bakr Asad ibn Abi al-Majid al-Asadi al-Kufi takes from Abu Abdurrahman, Abu Allah ibn Abi al-Sumi, takes it from the Uthman bin Affan, takes it from the Ali bin Ali Tabab, takes it from the Sayyid bin Habib, and Ubay bin Ka'b. It's in that narration,
Sorry, can you say that again? I didn't hear you.
You have to listen to that because you didn't
I just couldn't hear you.
I'll read it again, okay? Hafs ibn Sulaiman from Abu Bakr Asim ibn Abi al-Majid al-Asir al-Kufi, Abi Abdurrahman, Allah ibn Abi al-Sulami, Uthman bin Affan, Ali ibn al-Tabi, and Zayd bin Tabit, and Usay bin Ka'b.
Okay.
Okay? And they take from the Muhammad. They take from the Muhammad.
Where's the Ubay bin Ka'b?
So,
You said Ubay bin Ka'b was in the chain.
yes, I did. I did read it. Uthman ibn Affan, and Ali ibn Ali Tabi, and Zayd bin Tabit, and Ubay bin Ka'b comes from that. So it's there. I'll give you all this. It's my turn, right? So I'll just correct it on that. And while people are disagreeing with one another, Masood and Ka'b disagreeing, and then also reading from the tradition, they didn't like Zayd bin Tabit. How can you trust that chain? Because you've got the names, it doesn't make that much sense. Plus, can you please provide for me written version of the Quran from Nasar ibn Asan in...
Sorry?
That was different. Can you please provide for me Abu Abdurrahman Abdullah ibn Habib al-Sumi's Quran that I can compare with the Hafs Quran? Also, can you please provide for me Al-Qab's Quran, Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran, so I can compare them, since you don't have the Quran from that time. And let me give you the dates again regarding the chains for the dates which you didn't remember. So, I know information regarding the 25 different Qurans that existed in the I'll give you the name so you can read it from the Abu Ubayd al-Qasim ibn Salam. He's dated 839. He gathered 25 different Qurans. And then you can go back to the Shia sources, they are disagreeing with one another.
Shia. Don't talk to me about Shia.
And then
that's a different conversation.
You can look at the Sunni sources, and then you can see in...
Okay. Do you want to continue? No, let her finish, please.
And then in 912, there are 50 different Qurans talking about Tariq al-Quran, page 39. And then again, Sunabidan, 939, they are talking about the lots of different Qurans.
Okay.
And then he talks about the use.
I give her a bone, she took the whole meat.
Your tongue reading has been from 25 to 50 to 10 reading came down in 1397.
Would you like me to respond to that? Thank you very much. That was good. There's a difference between vertical chains and horizontal ones, yeah? So the vertical chain that we've narrated is, because you mentioned Asim as well, so Asim and Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami and Uthman al-Affan and Muhammad sallallahu. These are four individuals, yeah? Obviously there's going to be people horizontally. Now the point you ask is, how comes we have variants? Give me Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami's Quran. This is a very silly thing to say. Why? Because all of them relied upon the Uthmani manuscript, as you know, yeah? As we all do. In fact, anyone who studies this fan of, or what do you call it, this discipline, this science. Everything goes back to the Uthmani Musahif. There are 4, some say 6, Uthmani Musahif that was sent to Bahrain, to Yemen, to Sham, to Egypt, not to Egypt, to Medina, sorry, and one to Kufa. There's a difference of opinion. These Musahif are literally the Uthmani Musahif, which were, or the Qurans, the Kutub, which were authenticated by Uthman and his Lajna. The question of, okay, how comes Ubay ibn Ka'b and Ibn Mas'ud, they had a difference of opinion, it's true. You can find that in Bukhari, that in the beginning Ubay ibn Ka'b thought there was 2 additional surahs, and Ibn Mas'ud, he thought Falaq and Nas were not part of the Quran. Both of those individuals detracted their earlier statements. And that can be found in the fact that both of those individuals were part of the Lajna, or the commission, that was commissioned by Uthman al-Affan, yes, at his time. So, the question of where is the Quran of Abi Abdurrahman al-Sulami is the same one as the one Uthman used. So that's why all of the Masahif of Uthman, all of the Kutub of Uthman, are the ones we rely upon as Muslims. Your job is to show that there has been interpolation in those Masahif, and that there's been interpolation within the chain. Because when you mention, okay, there's 50 different, I don't even know what source it is, but let's just say for the argument's sake, no problem, I can't remember what source you used. But let me tell you something that Ibn al-Jazari, because he mentioned him himself. She mentioned Ibn al-Jazari. If you read his books, Tariq al-Nashar, which is a seminal work, and obviously he's one of the major scholars of Islam in this regard, he says about this, that something will not be registered as Quran unless it has 2 different things. Number 1, it has to be in compliance with the Uthmani script. Number 2, it has to be compliant with the Arabic language. And number 3, it has to have a chain of narration. And لابد أن يكون مشهورا. He says it's got to be at least mashhur, or we call it mutawatir, which means it has to have a mass transmission. So anything now that comes about, that you bring about, say, hey, this is a Quran. If you excavate any Quran which is different to the one we have now, and it's different, yeah? Even if it comes at the time of Uthman, even if it comes after him, we'll say, if it doesn't meet those 3 conditions, you can't even call it anything. This is not Quran.
What is the date for those conditions?
Pardon?
What is the date for those conditions?
He wrote it.
What is the date?
I don't understand what you're talking about. Anyway, so,
What is the date?
do you mind if I continue? I'm sorry, I didn't cut you off. These are questions about peripheral issues. I'm saying that a Quran is that which meets those 3 conditions. And that's why that Qira'at al-Ashr, the 10 authentically transmitted Qira'at, these meet all the transmissions. There are what you call shawad. There are other ones, shared Qira'at, that don't meet those 3 conditions. Therefore, we don't even consider them Qur'ans. We don't consider them Qur'ans. So anything else you bring is not going to be...
I think it's the second time you still haven't responded to my question regarding what's happening in Surah 33. I would really appreciate your answer on that.
Yeah.
And can you please provide the dates for me when they decided those conditions? Is the date for those conditions are 935, or is date for those conditions are 1397? Depend what do you believe, how many crafts, official crafts are there. So, aren't those dates too late for those things to be arranged and practiced? I am saddened that you cannot provide anything for me from the name I give it to you, which was from the house narration. I guess you cannot provide anything for me for Al-Basri or for Hatun. So, as the day written form, I can confirm that. Because I don't think you can... Can you please provide me written forms of the name I give it to you from the chain of the house? That I can compare, that is the chain actually, it is like transmitted correctly. Because today, according to the tradition, I've got a Quran which takes back me to the house, but it doesn't take me back to Uthman or to Muhammad, because you've got nothing written down from that I can compare. And if it is written down, I would appreciate to see that. So, my question is that I would love you to provide information for me regarding the Surah 33. I would love you to provide information for me regarding the written version of the Quran. And as I give you the names, we see from those narrations, those people are disagreeing with one another. So, even you've got them, I've got the Quran here, it doesn't tell me, oh, by the way, Ibn Masud's Quran has this, or Ibn Ka'b's Quran has this. Yeah. It doesn't provide those informations for you. I would appreciate if you provide those things for us. And every Muslim, when they look at the Quran, they stop saying, oh, Quran is perfect because there is no variances. And I show you some of the variations. There are approximately 45,339 of them. I'm just going to show you a couple of things, and I would love you to show me which one goes to the Muhammad, and I would love you to kind of confirm that with the written sources which goes back to the Muhammad. I'm not making a claim that, for example, Forge Quran or Hatun Quran teaches different Islam. I'm not saying, oh, they teach there is different prophet, or they teach there is different God. But I'm making a point. There are lots of variations, yet my Quran I'm reading doesn't speak about it. And Muslims are claiming Quran has been perfectly preserved to God. Can you please unpack that?
Yeah, okay, so let's start with the first thing you told me to answer, which is chapter 33, verse 6, where it says, when it talks about the adopted sons. It talks about the adopted sons. وَاللَّهُ يَقُولُ الْحَقَّ وَيَهْدِي السَّبِيلَ. It's this verse, yeah? وَاللَّهُ يَقُولُ الْحَقَّ وَيَهْدِي السَّبِيلَ. This verse is the ending of the verse. When it talks about the adopted sons. And obviously chapter 33, verse number 40 is the famous one. مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدٌ أَبَا أَحَدٍ مِنْ رِجَالِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَخَاتَمُ النَّبِيِّينَ or Khatim al-Nabiyyin. And obviously in the 10 qira'ahs there's two different ways of reciting it. It's Khatim and Khatim, which is he's the seal of the Prophet and he's the final Prophet. So these are the two examples you've given me. The qira'at al-ashar of the qira'at al-ashar, it's not the case that you have 10 different variants, just to make this point very clear. You have two different variances distributed over the 10 variants, or 10 qira'at. So the two variants are Khatam and Khatim. In the case of chapter 33, verse 40. Khatam means the seal of the prophets. Khatam means the final prophet. Now, first of all, we would say there's no contradiction in those things. Number two, we would say, like for example, Hafs is Khatam, Khalun is Khatim, Warsh is Khatim, Hamza is Khatam, Kisai is Khatam. Do you get me? So it depends on which qira'ah you're reading. What we say is that the prophet recited it like this, and the prophet recited it like that. And we have chains that go back to both of those things. You get it? Okay, hopefully you understand it now, because it is quite straightforward to understand. You have selected verses where it can be recited in two different ways. The problem would be if in those mutawatir qira'ahs you could find, for example, contradiction. If you say that there's a contradiction by saying that the prophet is the final prophet and the seal of the prophet, that would be a problem. But there is no contradiction in that. Why would there be a contradiction in that? The second thing you said, you mentioned Al-Bazi for some strange reason. Okay, and he had two rawis, Qumbul, one of the rawis, and the other one. So Abu Dhaqwan, I think. Maybe I'm completely losing my mind here. But with Al-Bazi, he relied upon one of the Masahib of Uthman. See, here you have to understand that the Masahib of Uthman are more than one. There are at least 4 and up to 7. Those Masahib or those Kutub of Uthman, those Qira'at, that's why you'll find, for example, if you pick up a Warsh Qira'ah Quran, you'll find some wells, وَسَارَعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ. It's not there. And the Hafs one is there. Okay, so if you want to know everything about it, you have to know the Qira'at. Where are the Qira'at mentioned? They're mentioned in all the classical exegeses. Now, why is it not translated? I agree with you, actually. There should be some footnotes that say it could be read like this, sometimes it could be read like that. In fact, I had this conversation with one of the translators of the Quran myself, and we agreed that this is a long-term project, that we should introduce this, where you should have it. But in Arabic, it's definitely there. Most, if not all of the tafsir, as you can see here, it tells you all the different variant readings. There's a website called nquran.com. It's not an industrial secret. It's nquran.com. You'll find that it shows you all the awjuh al-ikhtilafat. And so this is, I don't know where we're going here.
Surah 33 verse 6 reads it. The Prophet is closer to the believers than their own selves, and their wives are, their mothers, blood relationships among each other have closer personal ties. In the declare of Allah, then believers are muhajirs. Nevertheless, to you, what is just to your closest friends, just is such as writing of the declare. In some qira'ats, like Ubay bin Ka'b, occur also words called he is a father of them, which implies his spiritual relationship and connection with the the world, and his wives are their mothers. This is spiritual fatherhood with the confronted, pointed with the reputation of the Durga superstition of calling any like Sayyid by the appellation Sayyid ibn Muhammad. Such an application is really disrespectful to Prophet. Reason for that is Surah 33 verse 48. So, you didn't respond to my questions regarding the Surah 33
Don't worry, it's not
verse
Muslim.
6.
It's not because you put the Quran on the floor. But I was just saying, don't worry, because it's English. It doesn't really matter.
It's a book, I don't worship it. So,
That's all right.
you failed to give me the dates regarding when the 10 Qurans may be officialized, and what is your sources which takes back to Muhammad? It has been ever way after Muhammad. They are not the Ahlus, they are the Qurans. So I would love you to give me the dates and then explain what happened from 640 to 1400s that they decided and then picked those 10 Qurans. Okay? I would love to know that. And also I would love to know what was the source that they would know who were the officials of those Qurans. I guess you are apologizing regarding you got the Ubay bin Ka'b is wrong. So I would like you to also explain to me a little bit regarding as Ubay bin Ka'b and Ibn Masud are disagreeing with the Qurans, why I cannot find their versions in the Qurans people are reading. Only 80, let me be generous, 20% of the world speaks Arabic, understands Arabic, plus some of the Muslim missionaries. 80% of Muslims don't understand Arabic. They just recited it. Why you are not being helpful to them and sharing those informations with them? I would love to know that.
I think that's what we're trying to do here.
It's in process.
Here is the
Got
song.
what, 8 seconds left?
5 seconds.
I've got some days regarding the Qurans.
Okay, next time. You can do this. I did give her like, sometimes I give them, but then she took like half a minute after. Okay, your point about Ubay bin Ka'b and Ibn Mas'ud, both of them had different understanding of what constituted the Quran. Ubay bin Ka'b believed in 2 other dua that he thought was part of the Quran. Ibn Mas'ud had Falaq al-Nas, Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, chapter 113, chapter 114 of the Quran, not as part of the corpus. They both retracted that. Okay, but you have to understand, these guys were around at the time of Prophet Muhammad. When did they retract that? They retract that because we know they were part of the Lajna. They were part of the commission that Uthman put forward. So they both retracted it. They said, okay, this was something we thought, and then now we understand differently. So the idea is, where is the Ubay bin Ka'b Quran? There is no such Quran. It doesn't exist. Do you get it? Where is the Ibn Mas'ud Quran? There is no such Quran. It just simply doesn't exist. They agreed with Uthman on his rendering of the Quran. And the only way you can disprove that is by showing that either of those 2 men, or both of those 2 men, were not present or not alive at that time. And these were the highest of Quranic scholars. They would have been summoned by this man, by Uthman al-Affan, in order to take shura from him, and this is well known. So this is the first point. So the second point is that you have to understand here the 10 qira'at, because you keep referring to them as different Qur'ans, which is once again very disingenuous. I'm saying these are called qira'at, which means stylistic readings, yeah? It's one book, you have one book, one codified entrenched document, which can be read in certain circumstances in more than one way. So for example, the word Malik now, if you bring out any mushaf, if you would like to bring out any mushaf, you will see that even in the Hafs qira'ah of the Quran, you will see that it says Malik, it says Malik, Mim, Lam and Kaf. It says Malik, which means King of the Day of Judgment. But then you have Idkhal Alif al-Khanjariyah. And Alif al-Khanjariyah is a small little alif, so that if someone wanted to read it Malik, they can. So even within one, you're asking about footnotes, this is more ingenious than footnote, because you have here one lexical phrase which facilitates 2 different readings. Where that is not possible, that there is necessarily the case that we have not only footnotes, but a whole different text. That's why we have a different stylistic reading. For example, for wash, we have different wells, which means and conjunction in Arabic language. So here, because you could have put well in brackets, but because it's more befitting for you to read it as a continuous prose, they made a completely different qira'ah for it. So they got, now you go to a Moroccan masjid and they read it in Warsh. You go to a Libyan masjid, they read it in Khalun. All of those different qira'at, they go back to one source. And this is our point. Unless you can refute this point that it goes back to the Prophet, then you really haven't got any case.
So you said there is no, you didn't respond to Surah 33. I'm still waiting to respond to that one. You said there is no Quran called Ibn Masud's Quran or Bible Quran. Can you just tell me what is Ibn Shu'anabu in 939 talking about that he is using the Ibn Masud's Quran and Ubayd's Quran? Can you also please explain it to me? Can you also please explain to me why Ibn Masud even didn't want to give his Quran? So even they were disagreeing with certain surahs. Can you please tell me, did Muhammad read Surah Fatiha, Surah 113, Surah 114, and Surah 115, 116 was the part of the Quran or not? Because there is some questions regarding the Muhammad's memory in that case. And I would love you to please provide for me written forms of what, for example, Zakwan got it from Muhammad, and what Hisham got it from Muhammad, and why the written form of those Qurans are different. I'm not talking about Malik versus Malik. I'm talking about innocent creatures, for example. I'm going to give you some examples. So let me give you a couple of examples which hopefully will help you.
That's why I don't like okay.
The single difference is they have 70. And this is the Usmanic font.
Yeah, it can be really good.
I'm going to give you some examples. For example, Surah 98 verse 6. Creation versus innocent. They are different things. Surah 72 verse 20. One of them is say, other one is he said. Surah 49 verse 6. So verify it versus he stood firmly. He stood firmly.
No, that's not true.
Surah 46 verses 15. Doing good things versus beating. Surah 43.
Wrong translation.
Surah 43 verse 24. 43 verse 19. Slaves versus in the presence or near. So I'm not talking about the different citations. I'm talking about different writing.
Yeah, I know which one's different.
Different writing skills, and I would love you to tell me which one goes to the
Oh, sorry, you ran over a bit. Okay, so let's go through the ones that she said, alright? So, by the way, chapter 33, verse 6, within Hafs can be read in two different ways. You can have Wallahu yahdi, what was that? Wahuwa yahdi sabil and sabila. You can say it in two different ways, but it doesn't make any difference to the translation. But that's even mentioned in the footnotes of the Hafs Quran. In the back, if you look at the emblems, it doesn't make a difference. That's one. Point number two, chapter number 98, verse 6, as she says, she translated bari'ah as what is it? Innocent, which doesn't mean that. And she translated which one was it?
So bari'ah.
No, she has 98.6. And then she had what? Was that one you had?
49.6.
Huh?
49.6.
No, she had 49.6. Tabayyanu tathabatu. He stood firm, which is not correct. Tabayyanu means double check it. Tathabatu means double check it. The only difference is tabayyanu means make sure from that person. Tathabatu, when you get the news, make sure from that person. So it's such a nuanced difference. It's almost the same thing completely. And how could it be the two things? One lexical phrase in this situation could have facilitated the two different letters. Because the ba and the ya and the noon and the tha, tathabatu, and the ba, yeah, that could be, it's all like the same lexical phrase that you can attach dots into it. So in other words, the Uthmani Mus'haf, which at the beginning didn't have tanqeed, didn't have dots, could have facilitated both of the two readings. تثبتوا أن تبينوا. Or in the case of Surah thing, Sabil Sabila, it's even, they've got a little circular oval
It's
thing.
not it can, it does. It's the same text.
Yeah.
Every single example you've said is the same text.
The same text. So really here, what we want to find out from
Same
you
text.
is because you
One
keep
extra.
telling us that, look, you said Ibn Mas'ud has a Mus'haf and Ubay ibn Ka'b has a Mus'haf. Agreed. They have Masahif. You have to understand that there's a difference between a Mus'haf and the Quran. What do I mean by that? Ibn Mas'ud's Mus'haf and Ibn Abbas's Mus'haf, this was his own personal thing. And according to the ijma' of the Muslims, the consensus of the Sahaba, they used to write their own tafsir in the Mus'haf. So in other words, you have, like, for example, in the Quranic verses, any verse, there's one verse, حافظوا على الصلوات الخمس. Yeah, this is actually a tafsir that Ibn Abbas put into the Mus'haf. Yeah, but you don't recite that in prayer. So this would not be registered as the Quran. We go back to what is the Quran. The Quran is that which meets three criteria. That which is in conformity with the Uthmanic script, is in conformity with the Qurayshi Arabic, and is in conformity and has mass transmission. So what you're referring to is a Mus'haf and not Quran. This, I agree with you, is not Quran. We don't accept it. We would never recite prayer like that. Because here, Ibn Mas'ud or Ibn Abbas, when he was reciting the Quran, he put his own take on it. He put his own take on it. So we wouldn't accept it.
So, am I right to understand that you are just telling them the Quran Ibn Mas'ud was reciting or Bible comes reciting minus surahs and edited surahs has nothing to do with Muhammad. Is that correct? So, regarding the Surah 33 verse 6 and Surah 33 verse 40, it changed the theological difference. Is Muhammad biological father or spiritual father? Read it both of them together so it will help you on that.
There's no difference about father. It's
Ubay
33-40.
Ka'b's Quran was different.
What did it say?
So,
Sorry, I don't understand this point. Can you make it clearer? Because where's the father
Surah
difference?
33 verse 6 versus
What does it say about
Surah
father?
33 verse 40.
It doesn't say father there.
It does. One of them talks about the spiritual father, other one is talking about the blood father. Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran was different.
Talking about adopted sons, yeah?
I would love you to get me that reference. It will be helpful if you just open your Quran, you will see what I mean, and compare Surah 33 verse 6 versus Surah 33 40 because there is a contradiction on that. So I understood that those different readings has nothing to do with Muhammad. They all go back to Uthman with his graphs for the Arabic alphabet. As you know, Arabic speaker, Arabic consonantal letters has 6 of them only doesn't have dots. For you to understand the rest of 22 letters, you need a dot. So Ya, Ta and Nun are different from one another. When you look at the different Arabic Qurans, you can see that. And you can see in early Islamic century people are disagreeing. You still fail to give me the date when those 10 readings become official readings. Because I gave you the dates and then I give you the sources. You had 25, 50 and then it becomes 7 and it becomes 10. So I'll show you some examples and then please explain why those differences are.
By the way, it doesn't say fathers in that verse. I just made sure. Where does it say fathers? In verse 6, it doesn't say anything about father.
So in here, I've got some variations. There are 45,339 variations, and I would love Muslims to finally produce a critical edition of the Quran for us to go and see them. So it will be helpful. So here is my list, for example.
Let's go one by one. I'll put them all.
Here is my list for you,
Finally.
so that we can walk through them.
Every single one.
Surah 98, verse 6.
خير البرية.
Al-Bara.
Sorry. Shall we just leave the time?
Yeah, leave the time. Leave the time.
No,
Let's establish point by point.
No, I
No,
don't.
I mean,
She's got 5 seconds left. Give me the 3 minutes and then we can do it.
I'll give it 15 seconds. Do you want to do it within the time? Yeah, this one.
Yeah, it's my time and then we will check.
You got 20 seconds. 20 seconds.
So, yeah, this is my
Okay, alright, thank you. Do you know, one thing I do want to commend you for today, Hatun. To be honest with you, I have to commend Hatun. I think she's come with an improved personality. No, seriously, I'm able to have a discussion with her, which is academic. Yeah, and she's not shouting at me. Yeah, and I'm grateful for that as a Muslim. You know, I'm grateful. Thank you very much. Seriously. Now, going back to Ibn Mas'ud and Ibn Abbas. Yeah, so Ibn Mas'ud and Ibn Abbas, as I said to you before, the Mus'haf that they wrote on, this particular Mus'haf, it's not the Quran basically. It's their tafsir. They had, like for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah it says, حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين. It says, guard your prayers in the middle prayer and stand for Allah upright. In one of the renditions, they put down the tafsir, a note, you know, like you do notes, says you're doing like حافظوا على الصلوات الخمس, which doesn't even, it's not even compliant with many Mus'haf. Ibn Abbas,
Sana manuscript, they say, لا تقل بسم الله between 8 and 9.
Don't interrupt.
From the text.
yeah, so I'm going to leave it to you. Yeah? Basically, the point I'm making here is that you can't keep referring to this as the Quran as if we as Muslims consider it Quran. We as Muslims consider the Uthmani Mus'haf, which is in Sana'a now, in Yemen, read in the 10 different stylistic traditions, which have mass transmission, which go back to the Prophet Muhammad. We consider that as the Quran. Anything that's not what I've just described simply is not a Quran. So anything you find, excavated from the ground, or if you find it in a library or whatever you want, and it's indifferent to what we've just said, to what we just said, we would not consider that the Quran. It's as simple as that. So whatever you do now, there's no historical remnant or artifact that can ever disprove our thesis, because basically we've understood what the Quran is. Nothing can basically block that. You have the position, and by the way, let me just quickly, 33 verse 4 and verse 6, there's no mention of father at all. 40 is 33:40, he mentions father, yeah? 33:6 and 4 doesn't. Anyways, the point is, the word ما كان محمد أبا doesn't, there's no difference in that. In all the Qira'at al-Ashr, there's no difference in that. The difference in that verse is with the word Khatim and Khatam. There's no difference in the word Abba. So that was a false thing you said there. Maybe because you don't know about it, but let me teach you now. It's basically, there's no difference in the word Abba. Within the 10 Qira'at, all of them say Abba, which basically means the father of any of you men. Anyways, all of the Qira'at agree on that. No, sorry. The verse in question, ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن. Anyways.
Which ayah was surah?
Huh?
ما كان محمد أبا أحد.
33:40. Anyways, Abba something else. Abba something else. Okay, that's Surah Al-Abasa, chapter 18 of the Quran. Anyways, the point is, you haven't been able to prove your thesis. Give me something which shows that there's a contradiction within the Qira'at. That's now we're talking. Okay, that's the Quranic challenge.
Okay. I am saddened that you failed to make a point on Surah 33 verse 66 and 40. Let me read it for you again. You can check it from your Quran. The Prophet is closer to the believers than their own selves. And his wives are their mothers' blood relations. So it goes on.
It doesn't
And
say
then
blood
it
relations,
says
it's the mother.
blood relations.
It doesn't say that in the Quran. وأزواجه أمهاتكم.
It does say that.
That's a
It does say that. It's not in the parentheses. Then I am sorry, your
وأزواجه
Abdullah
أمهاتكم.
Yusuf Ali is just lying to the Muslim world for a long time. It does say that.
It just says وأزواجه أمهاتكم.
It does say that in the translation of Yusuf
It doesn't
Ali.
say blood. It doesn't say blood.
It does say that in the translation of
Why not?
Yusuf
I
Ali,
don't care what
and
translation.
it is not in the parentheses.
وأزواجه
Why should I
أمهاتكم.
trust your translation
Anyways, go
versus
on.
Yusuf
No
Ali's
problem. Okay,
translation?
you have.
So, Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran considered after their own selves is, and he is a father of them. Okay? So, when you compare that with the Surah verse 40, when you compare that with Surah 40, you see the contradiction of that. Spiritual father or
There's no father in chapter 4, verse 4. There's no father. It doesn't say father.
Because Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran say, why you haven't been open about it? That's my question. So this is Ka'b's Quran. Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran says that. So
What does
I
it say
would love
father?
you to,
Even his one.
I would love you to explain that to me. And can you please
this
make
is
point
integrated to lies
again? Make point again. Who was the person made a decision that Surah Haft and Surah Al-Kahf is not
Surah what, sorry?
Surah Haft, H-A-F-T, and Al-Kahf is not is not in Muhammad's Quran. It's not the Quran which Muhammad give it to the people. I would love you to provide sources for that. And if you are going to discredit the Ibn Masud and Ibn Qabs, then how are you going to trust the Quran they brought it to you, because they are in the chains? Sorry. So I'm waiting for you to respond to me. I'm waiting for you to respond to me regarding the Surah 33. I am waiting you to respond to me if those two surahs edited or taken out, which is the correct version Muhammad had it. How come I can't have access to them? In the Hafs Quran I am reading now. Also, I would love you to tell me the dates when those Qurans, those 10 readings have been officialized. And can you tell me what happens from 6:30 to that time?
So, okay, I think I'll answer your first question about Ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abbas quite a few times.
I haven't answered that.
Okay, let me answer it now then. Maybe I didn't answer it before. I agree with you that in the first instance, as can be found in Bukhari, that Ibn Mas'ud, he didn't consider Surah Al-Falaq, which is chapter 113, and Surah Al-Nas, which is chapter 114, as part of the Quran. And I also agree with you that Ubay ibn Ka'b in the first instance considered there to be 115 and 116. Okay, which is Dua al-Qunut. It's a dua. Now, both of those people were mistaken. Okay, how do we know they were mistaken? Because they themselves retracted their statements. They retracted it. When did they retract it? Okay, the source is when they came. You know, there's a lajna. The lajna of what do you call it? Uthman al-Affan, the committee of Uthman al-Affan. This was included them, and the final product, which is the Uthmanic manuscript, included their consent. So they consented to the final, basically the Uthmani manuscript as the Quran that was revealed. So they realized that this was something that they got wrong, and they both took it back. It's as simple as that. As for the whole idea of you referring to a Ibn Mas'ud Quran, Ibn Abbas Quran, or something like that, I said they didn't refer to themselves. Okay, whatever. The point is, they themselves didn't recall the book that they had, the Quran. It's a mushaf. It's a book that they put their own notes on it. And those notes, sometimes it had their own tafsir. They had their own tafsir. And the tafsir went against the Uthmani script completely. Like Hafizu ala salawat al-khams. Like in chapter 33, verse number 40, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says about the sun, what is that? No, hold on. Chapter 36, not 33, yeah? Yeah.
36 which verse?
36 verse 40. Can you show me? I need to jog my memory on this one. وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي مُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا. Yeah? This is how it is in Hafs. وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي مُسْتَقَرٍ. The verse in Arabic is that the sun runs through an orbit with its own axis, yeah? It runs its course. وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي مُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا. In Ibn Abbas's reading, he says, الشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لَا مُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا. لَا مُسْتَقَرَ لَهَا. الشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي, the sun runs, and it doesn't have a place of setting. It doesn't have a place of setting. Obviously, scientifically, we know this is true, yeah? The sun continues to run, but it doesn't have a place of setting. But this doesn't fulfill the conditions of complete, basically the three things. So here we have his tafsir of it, Ibn Abbas. الشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لَا مُسْتَقَرَ لَهَا. He understood it as meaning that the sun, although it continues to run in the sky, it doesn't actually set anywhere. Do you get me? So the sun is not setting anywhere. That's actually one of the interesting points of the Quran when you go about the science discussion, but that's something else. Going back now, what I'm trying to say is that this Mus'haf of Ibn Abbas and Ibn Mas'ud, these are Masahib which are not Qurans. They are not Qurans. They are just basically their thoughts. Sometimes they put their own thoughts there. Do you get me? So that's different. Thank you very much.
You still have not responded to Surah 33 verse 6 and 14. I'm still waiting to respond to that question.
I don't know. What's the question? Sorry.
So, you still fail to give me the dates regarding when those 10 clubs have been officialized. And also, I guess you are still making a point that actually we don't know if Ibn Masud or Ibn Qab's surahs were part of what Muhammad recited or not. Because in 939, people are using Qab's and Masud's Quran in 939. So
who are the people?
I gave you the names earlier. So if you can't remember them, I can give you them.
There's a lot of
later.
people actually, you're right. There's a lot of people that mention it.
People are still using those things,
not in-
and
not in
they are
Islam.
not in my Qurans I am reading now. So I would love you to kind of just provide some sources for me. Are those were in the Quran which Muhammad recited, and we know from the Islamic tradition that actually Muhammad failed to remember the certain verses, and then he praised people that people remind them. Regarding your side note regarding the Quran, we know science, we know Quran destroys science and science destroys the Quran. But as you say that side note, we can come to that later if you want. So, I would love us to go through those variations, and I would love you to kind of make a point. So, my first example is the Zakwan. First of all, can you just tell me about him?
Zakwan.
And how do you know this guy is reliable? And is this part of your tongue reading or not? After you give me your statements.
It is. Same text. The many text is the same.
So,
Here, I've got it here,
I
it's
would
my
love
text.
you to provide those informations for me. Also,
read both ways.
can you just talk about the chain of the Zakwan and provide some information for me for that as well? After that, so that's for Zakwan. And then also, my next one is Al-Laid ibn Khabat. It's the same. I want some information about the person, and I want you to provide some details for me. How do you trust this person?
It's not part of the
And also, I would love you to provide some information for me regarding the Hafs and how you are comfortable that Hafs is reliable, since we don't have any hadiths in Hafs hadith because people thought Hafs wasn't reliable, yet Hafs is reliable for the Quran. So my question still stands. I would love you to provide dates for me for the 10 reading, and the reasons they've been done, and I would love you to provide detailed information for me that which surahs was Muhammad recited.
Yeah, finish your sentence.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Finish your sentence.
Okay.
Alright. What I was going to say is that, okay, you talked about the Zakwan. Zakwan is one of the 10 readers, so we accept it. The second one you brought there is not, so we don't really accept it. In terms of Quran, it's not one of the 10 readers. An easy way to understand whether we as Muslims, an easy way to understand, right, what we consider to be the Quran as it relates to the Islamic discourse is as follows. And I've said this a few times, but I want to just make this very clear. The Uthmani Mus'haf, the Uthmani Quran, the book of the Uthman and his people that they read upon, this can facilitate more than one reading in certain passages. Okay? There's certain verses like Malik and Tathabatu Tabayyanu and all these things that we've just been through, that sometimes you can facilitate more than one reading. If it matches with that, if something, number one, matches, it's like a puzzle, it matches with the Uthmani Mus'haf, number one, and it matches with the Arabic language of the old people, number two, and it has a chain of narration which is mass narrated at each level, number three, then we can be confident in saying that that thing, whatever is being recited, was recited by the Prophet Muhammad. And when we do that, okay, it's my turn now. Sorry. But when we do that, we come to a conclusion that there are 10 certain stylistic ways in which you could actually recite the Quran in prayer. There's only 10 ways of doing that. Those 10 ways, they're not contradictory, and for the most part, they are actually the same thing. For the most part, if you recite Surah Al-Fatiha in all 10 different styles, you will recite the same exact content with the exception of one word, which is Malik, which can be recited Malik, which means king, and Malik, which means owner. So here the point is this. It's not that we have X amount of Quran. This is a false understanding. The correct academic understanding is that you have now this codified document, which is the Quran, which can facilitate, because of its lexical structure, more than one reading. If it doesn't, if for example Ibn Mas'ud doesn't, it does not fit in with that. Yeah, it doesn't. You cannot correlate it because there are some phrases that are completely away from it. Ibn Abbas and the Arba' Shawaz, they don't go in there. So therefore we say these are not the Quran. We don't consider them the Quran. We would never be allowed to pray behind someone who reads like that. If someone now reads with Ibn Abbas's Qira'ah, we would say this is not the Quran and your prayer is invalid. Unless he obviously recites Surah Al-Fatiha the way he's going to recite. But Ibn Mas'ud's Mus'haf didn't even have Surah Al-Fatiha. Ibn Mas'ud's Mus'haf didn't even have Surah Al-Fatiha. But he knew.
Correction. We have reports from Ibn Mas'ud.
He didn't need it.
He had variants.
Okay, your
Yeah.
time.
No interruption.
Sir,
Yeah.
So he did.
Yeah. So okay, there you go.
You have not given me date. Okay? I am still.
Do you want to give a date? Let
I'm
him. He's
still-
better with dates.
No, I'm talking to you.
No, he's
you,
good.
You got very good brain. I'm talking to
You
you.
got very good grades. Delegating.
So, can you
I don't know
please?
the date.
Can you please give me the date
I
when
don't know.
those 10 readings have been made official? They've been made official for long after.
My legs are starting to get.
After 25
You know when you're
readings,
talking,
long
my lower
after
back's out.
50 readings, and long after 7 readings.
This is becoming a bit drawn out. Should we kind of last ones? Come on, last ones. Sorry, because it'll be too long for the viewers to watch. Even for me.
I'm not here for your views, sir.
No, not for your viewers. Look,
I'm
I'm
not
sorry.
here for your
I'm not. I don't mean to be rude. I just should we.
Okay, one more.
Yeah, finish. Sorry about
Should we
that.
go through all these
In
examples?
that case, it's my turn, and then you finish.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you have not provided any information for me for the Surah 33 verse 6 and Surah 33 verse 14. You have not provided for me any dates, which I asked you maybe like a couple of times. I would love to know when those 10 readings made official. Okay? Where are your 25 readings which was exist in 839? Where are those readings? You have not provided any information for me. Disagreements between Ubay bin Ka'b and disagreements between Masud, and they are Ubay bin Ka'b is the chain of the house. You have not provided any information for me for this Zakwan. Why do you believe this guy is reliable? I asked you questions regarding that. Why do you believe Hafs is reliable when you don't believe Hafs
Have you got the chain for
hadith, when you don't put on Hafs hadith, Hafs narrations in the hadith
Yeah, I know.
for the
I want the
Quran?
chain.
Yes, for the hadith, yes, yet you believe Hafs is reliable. I would love you to back that up and then tell me with sources why you believe in the Hafs Quran they follow. And also you fail to provide any sources for me. How can you be so sure when Muhammad failed to have a good memory regarding what are the Quranic verses, chapters? Yet in late decades you discredit the Masud's Quran. Yet those Qurans and Ubay bin Ka'b's Quran was exist in 900s. Yet those things have been discredited. Yet you don't have the good memory for Muhammad and you don't know that. So my question still stands and you have not provided any evidence for my questions. Can you please can you please provide some sources for that? And also you talked about when someone decides to Quran differently. Sorry, you don't have any complete Uthmanic Quran from the time of the Quran to go and check anything. So how can you compare that? And also you told me Allah is not in the 10 Qurans, but I would love you to check that because what do you mean?
When we talk about Khaled, that's what she means. If she says Khaled, that's a different. Yeah, we have Khaled and Khaled. Yeah, Khaled, but that's not what it says. It's Khalid. It's a different story. Anyways, there's no Khalid. Ibn Zakwan is. Let's see. We go.
Ibn Zakwan is the narrator of Ibn Amr.
Ibn Amr, and then
Yeah.
and then who's his narrator?
So from Ibn Amr, you can take the whole biography.
You got it from Hisham,
So it's your turn.
and then from Hisham, you got it from Uthman.
Are we going upwards or
Upwards,
downwards?
upwards. We'll get that from each other.
Sure.
Whilst we talk about it. So you asked about Ibn Zakwan. We'll get him particularly for you, the chain, because that is important if you want to be sure about it. The 10 qira'as are mutawatir. So what we mean by that is all that qira'at al-ashar, or the 10 qira'as, have multiple chain of narration from each side, from each level. Just quickly answering your question about 33.6 and 33.40. 33.6 says nothing about fathers. It says nothing, the word father is not there.
Yeah, because it's in the Hafs Quran.
Yeah, in Hafs it's not there. It's not in any of the Quran. It's not in any of the Quran.
This is why the Hafs Quran.
No, it's not in any of the Quran. So here we have,
Where is it? Do you have it to compare?
I
Show us.
don't see it. I can't
Yeah,
see
show
it.
us.
No, it's my last one. But anyways, I know that it's not there, yeah? But any if it was, we just say it was something that goes back to the Prophet if it was in there. But it's not in there, so it's not. We can't use that as an evidence. That's one. Number two, 40, the word Aba, you said that the word father, it has theological implications. But there's no difference within the 10 qira'ahs in the word Aba. It doesn't exist. Okay, so you have to retract that now. Number three, well, so here the mas'ala, the issue is actually solved. In the beginning of this discussion, you said there's no problem with there being scriptural variation, and we're open about that. And we have in your Bible, we have like, you know what I'm saying, in manuscriptural things, we can go back to them. I'm saying there's an issue with that kind of variation, because that kind of variation is unaccounted for as it relates to going back to Jesus Christ. It doesn't go back to Jesus. I'm saying that there's a big difference between comparing variants, which are manuscript variances, which, I'm going to quote him, Bar says that there's 400,000 of them. There's more variants than there are words in the Bible.
That Bartolman says Jesus died on the cross.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Having said
That's
that,
a problem according to
no,
Islam.
hold on. And he said that 96 or 97% of the manuscripts that we have came after the 9th century, which is 2 centuries after Prophet Muhammad. This is a problem because here you have manuscripts that are introduced by human beings. What you're giving us is stylistic variants, which are all approved by Prophet Muhammad, and which all have a chain back to him, and which all go back to Allah. So what's the problem?
10 seconds.
So I actually challenge you here to actually it's finished. But I don't see how you can compare the two things. I really don't. But anyway, it's been nice talking to you this time.
Come back next week. Continue.
Thank you, Hatun.
Thank you.